this is a pretty comprehensive group. The structure is that there's a central task force that's charged with oversight for all of the work, and there are subgroups working on instructional issues, operational issues, social emotional issues, and communication. Within that profile, we have students, elementary teachers, middle school teachers, high school teachers, staff developers, administrators, parents, and several Board of Education trustees. So we're actually going to begin. We did mention the survey. I did mention the survey in my report, and the task force is going to, we're going to go through looking at the survey and then through each of the different subgroups and talking about the work of the subgroups and where we are at. As I said in my update, we still do not have guidance from the state of New York in any capacity, not from the governor's office, not from the Department of Health, and not from the New York State Education Department. What we have heard, and I know there were a bunch of articles in the last few days around the state about the fact that there is no guidance and how challenging a process this is, because we're frankly working in a vacuum, trying to design what we think and we believe is best for our community. And we are relying somewhat on the magic 8-ball to find out guidance from the state of New York. We do anticipate that the Board of Regents will be releasing something on July 13th. At the moment, we don't know what that will be, but there is an expectation, because the Board of Regents will be meeting on the 13th, that that information will become available after that time. In some earlier media articles, the governor was quoted as saying school districts would have a requirement to submit plans by July 15th. That never actually became anything other than a quote in newspaper articles. We've not been given guidelines for a plan or requirements for a plan or anything. So as far as we know, nothing is due on July 15th, and we hope to have the first set of guidelines sometime around the 13th. So I'm going to—
Dr. Byrne, can I just add one thing to that, just because I've had the opportunity to sit on the centralized task force and listen to a lot of the discussion. One thing to keep in mind, even though jurisdictionally plans from other states and other places are not something that we can follow per se, they do give us a lot of insight. And I just want to point out to those the community members listening that there's been an enormous amount of work done to not just gather those, but to assess those and evaluate those plans that are coming from various states, some international pieces of information, lots of medical studies. So there's constantly work going on around that, even though the state has not given us any particular guidance yet.
All right, I need it quick, so I only have a couple minutes to charge my phone. I really need that.
Tom?
Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, so Caitlin, I think you're going to take it away on the survey. I think Caitlin and Sherry are going to be going from this point.
Caitlin, do you have audio?
I'm sorry, I just started talking away and I'm on mute. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I said, thank you, Dr. Byrne. Yes, we wanted to receive a lot of information from different stakeholders within our organization. So the task force worked really hard together to come up with 3 different surveys that were sent out. So we did send a survey to our parents within the community for K-12, students 6-12, so our secondary students, and then our teachers K-12. At this point, as Dr. Byrne had said, we are keeping our surveys open until this Friday, July 10th, hoping to receive some more input from all these individuals. At this time, what I can speak to is the numbers of responses that we have and the type of instructional model that we see to be at the forefront of what our parents and students are looking for next year. So for the parent K-12 survey that went out, we have a little over 2,000 responses from families, which is excellent. And when we asked the particular question about what type of instructional model would you like to see your child have next year in school, the two that right now are at the forefront is a hybrid alternating day schedule, where kids may come in one day and maybe home the next, or a split day where they could potentially be in our buildings for an AM or PM session and then reverse.
Caitlin, if I could just interject, that question is based on if we are not in school and full-time, if everybody's preference for the most part is pretty consistent with everyone, staff, students, and families, is everybody's back at school. But anticipating that there could be challenges that we face with being required to reduce the number of students in school in order to implement social distancing practices. We presented several different models of a hybrid environment that would have some students at home and some students at school in order to reduce the number of students in the building. So I apologize for interjecting there, Caitlin.
No, that's great. Thank you. So as Dr. Byrne had said, with that hybrid model, either an alternating day or a split day, depending on what that schedule would look like, our parents have conveyed to us that they would like to see either when a child is home from an alternating day or a split day, that there is some type of synchronous learning taking place, which would be through our Google Hangout platform. From our student perspective, for grades K-12 at the secondary, we had about almost 600 students participate in the summer. And when they were asked the question about what type of hybrid schedule would work for you, if we had to go that route in the fall, they had very similar responses to parents, and that they are interested in either an alternating day or a split day. The one place that we see a slight difference is that our students are asking for the ability to complete assignments via our Google Classroom platform at their own pace, but then having the capability and ability to schedule hangout sessions with their teachers as like a scheduled office hour. So that's where we're seeing a little bit of discrepancy in terms on full-on synchronous versus completing assignments at home with the ability to meet with their teachers during a particular office hour. When we asked our teachers for the same input, we had approximately about a little over 200 teachers at this time respond. And again, we're looking for more input from all of our stakeholders up until Friday. Our teachers, again, we seem to be on this consistent theme, which is helpful for us, really interested in an alternating day or a split day. But they were very split when it came to letting students complete assignments on their own versus doing synchronous learning, maybe coming up with a blend with that. So these are all key points that we are taking back to the task force and having really rich discussions around if we need to implement a hybrid model, what would that look like for the Rye City School District? When we talk about the task force that we have in Rye, we have several different ones that we're spearheading. And one of them, it really looks at our instructional practices and approaches. And so Ms. Goffman and I have been leading this task force. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of what our framework is for the task force, what our goals are and objectives, and then she'll speak a little bit about some of our essential questions. So our task force is comprised of students, teachers, administrators, and parents, which is great because we are getting input from all individuals within Rye. We are divided into subgroups, which really helps us focus on particular essential questions and focus areas that Ms. Goffman will discuss in a few moments. When we're not meeting as a full group, because we do meet weekly, the task force subgroups meet individually to really hone in and get a lot of the work done, and then we bring it back to the larger committee to have discussions and look at all of the different areas, the pros and cons of things that we're bringing to the table. As a group, we are trying to plan for 3 different scenarios. So we are planning for if we come back to Rye in full capacity, if we do need to implement a hybrid model, or if we are fully remote as we were the last 13 weeks of school, what would that look like for us instructionally? So we are looking at our top essential questions and really breaking them down into these 3 areas. We are also looking at them from different lenses because we know instruction looks very different at the elementary, middle, and high school. And so that is a big focus when we tackle each of our essential questions. In addition, our instructional task force has also partnered with our operations team because we're working hand in hand in trying to really look at our attendance policies and reporting for next year. And how are we going to build a hybrid model that not only looks at a particular schedule from the instructional standpoint, but working with operations to make sure that we have protocols in place to make sure everyone is safe and social distancing when they are in our building. So we've worked together on that particular piece. And now I'm going to hand it off to Ms. Goffman to talk about what our essential questions are for the instructional task force.
Thank you, Caitlin. So when we started working on the instructional task force, we identified a number of key areas that we knew that we would need to focus on. And we started out with 6, we added 1 more, so we have 7, and I'm going to go through them in a little briefly. So as people have questions later on, I might be able to respond if I haven't been able to give you the specifics that you're looking for right now. The first 3 really went hand in hand, and we found that there was a lot of overlap between those 3. The first one was about assessing students' readiness for the next school year. Since we were in remote learning, it was very challenging for us to get a good read on all of the students' skills and also on all of the subject areas and the content that was focused on by each of the teachers. The second one was what steps we would need to take, which we started in June. So this was before the end of the school year. So you'll see the word now there over the summer and when we return to bridge the gap that we think we might see in certain circumstances. And how will we modify or adapt instruction and schedules when we return to comply with the recommended and mandated safety measures? So we have to take all of the safety into consideration while we're looking at making sure that we're addressing the needs of the students. Those 3 subgroups working together identified that in addition to the surveys that the district team sent out, that we would like to send a survey just to teachers to get some specific information from them. And we were able to do it in 2 ways. One was we did a survey through a Google form, and we asked teachers information about their current state of their content and how it compared to past years and where they identified the units and topics that they did teach and where they felt that they were less apt to have really provided the necessary ingredients for the students to learn those specific skills. And so that would help us with the assessing of the readiness for the students for September and then help us to adapt our curriculum and our instruction to meet the needs. In addition to that, at the elementary level, we sat down with each grade level group and we worked with them to look at the units of study in reading and writing and to have them identify what they did teach this year and make sure that we identified for next year what all grade levels will be working on at the same time, with a focused workflow for next year's learning in ELA. So for the grades K to 5, all the teachers across the district, all 3 elementary schools by grade will be teaching the same units of reading and units of writing, which didn't always happen with the teachers' college reading and writing model. There was a little flexibility, which now we've made standardized for next year. In addition to that, because we implemented the new Math and Focus program through our staff developer, Carrie Winderman, we also did something similar with the math, and we identified the work that was addressed during this school year, which we modified once we went into remote, and we started out with some of the units that would be a little less challenging and built to the more challenging units at the end of the remote year. And then how will that affect next year's learning for math? So we've done quite a bit of work on just getting the information. And now the real hard part is now saying, okay, how is it going to look as we move into potentially a remote situation or a hybrid situation? Our 4th question was about how to incorporate the new tools and instruction approaches that we've been learning about as the school has been closed in terms of technology. And our technology staff developers and Caitlin have really been leading that work. And we have a really good structure around what the professional learning would look like. We continue to offer professional learning and remote learning. And over the summer, we're doing the same. And as Dr. Byrne mentioned earlier about starting the extended school year program, we also started some in-person sessions. Actually, today was our first session for professional learning for teachers. And we had about 20 teachers participating in a technology workshop. Our next question was about supporting students who miss school for extended periods of time due to the illness that might happen with the COVID-19. And we are looking at, again, working with our operations subcommittee to look at what that would look like in terms of not just the attendance issues, but how we would continue to provide the long-term instruction for students who might be out of school. The sixth question was about plans for preparing for professional learning, not only for our teachers, but also for our staff and families. And we have a number of areas that we're focusing on for continuation of some of the parent universities that we began this year, and then identifying additional needs that we would have for supporting families and faculty and staff as we move forward into the next school year. And then the last one that we really came kind of later in the discussions, it was generated as we started to look at the calendar and some scheduling. We've identified that there are some regular typical on school site activities that we are just kind of normal recurring activities, such as back to school nights or parent conferences. And we need to be sure that we're planning accordingly so that we have a plan in place for a remote or some type of a hybrid model in the event that we can't have those activities back in school next year. And I think that really covers the instructional components, and I'm going to turn it over to Gabby O'Connor, who's going to speak to you about the operations subcommittee.
Thanks, Sherry. So yes, one of the other arms of the task force is the operations task force. We're working together to formulate and review all of the different areas that fall under operations, such as facilities, food service, health services, IT infrastructure, security, transportation, and workforce management, as we try to navigate the new world under COVID-19. We are focusing on planning for the possibilities of returning in the fall to school in an in-school model or the hybrid model. But much of what we are working on is very much dependent on what the instructional team is working on, as well as making sure that we adhere to the guidance and any of the rules that come our way that we've already realized or anticipate will be coming forward from the CDC, the DOH, and the and SED.
So Gabby, the reason you're only looking at the two is that if we're fully remote on the operations side, there's very little that would be managed from the operations side. Our food service would be up and running again as it's been. So if anybody out there was wondering why, or is the operations group just planning for two models, because there isn't much on the operational side if we were fully remote.
So I'm actually going to hand it off to my counterpart in terms of the lead on the operations task force, Kathy Vigiano, to talk about some of the things that we've been doing. Caitlin, can you flip the slide?
So these are examples of some of the considerations that we are considering for all the different areas, from facilities as far as cleaning and disinfecting, from health and safety as far as making sure we have all the essential equipment and supplies, including PPE, disinfectant, hand sanitizing, wipes for surfaces, self-assessment training and awareness. We want to also make sure that we're continuing to educate and promote health and wellness. We're also looking at food service, making sure we have access for free and reduced population, as well as providing meals in a safe and appropriate manner to our entire population. We're monitoring staff and student attendance for contact tracing purposes. Classroom hardware upgrades to promote live streaming. So this would be from the IT standpoint to see so that we can enhance learning. Reallocation of devices to avoid sharing. Restricting building access for visitors and deliveries. Reviewing safety drill training and making any necessary adjustments depending on the model that we are in, because it may look very different than what we're used to. and collaborating with the instructional task force to revise student attendance and absence reporting policies to formulate the hybrid schedule and home instruction plans, as well as exploring options for staffing shortages. And I'm going to hand it off to Tracy so she can talk about some of the, in more detail about the health and safety.
A couple of things. Oh, sorry. A couple of things when we're looking at PPE, personal protective equipment, we're really looking at it in a couple of ways. We want to make sure that we have enough supplies available and we have able to get it through various different vendors. We're also looking at the types of PPE that is being used. For example, during ESY, extended school year, we're learning that face shields are actually a good device or a good method to use for instruction. So when a teacher is providing instruction, the student can see the teacher's face, can see the teacher's facial expressions, and it works in place of wearing the mask and the goggles. So when they're providing instruction, this is an option that a lot of the faculty really prefer. Another thing that I know we mentioned contact tracing. This is something through the Department of Health that we here at the district is going to have to do. So that's where attendance becomes something that we're going to have to follow through and continue to monitor. There has been, I think, 3 or 4 people from the district that has taken the Johns Hopkins contact tracing course. So they're actually have some skill. And so if we need to utilize this, we have these tools already available to us. A couple of other things that I have found through ESY training, we're doing a lot of education to the faculty, to the parents, actually even to the students. And it's really beneficial because something as simple as hand washing and just reviewing with everyone and actually doing a demonstration goes a very long way. I think that's it. Gabby, do you have anything else to add?
No, I think we've also learned a lot about temperature taking and making sure people know the difference between Celsius and Fahrenheit and what's a, healthy temperature versus a temperature that we should be concerned with that's way below what our temperatures are supposed to be. So I think we've learned a lot through this whole process as well.
And we do expect, I think I said it earlier, the CDC had a press release yesterday that there should be some updated school guidance in the next couple of days. And I know Tracy, Gabby, and I monitor that stuff all the time and monitor the CDC for any new illnesses that we have to be preparing for it as well.
Yep. So I think we're going to pass off to social emotional, Erin Riedenberg.
Great, thank you so much. Just before I start, I just want to let everyone know, because Dr. Byrne did mention it briefly, we did start our in-person ESY extended school year program this week on Monday. So it has been a busy 2 days, but I am happy to say that with the help of Tracy Barnett and the staff, and Lisa Mountain, who is the ESY coordinator, things have gone very smoothly. So in terms of having students, teaching them what social distancing is, the purpose of it, how to keep themselves safe, as well as staff and everything, we have protocols in place, and it's, in my opinion, gone really well. In terms of what I am here to speak more about is the social emotional task force. So the other thing, along with the other task force that you just spoke about, myself and Dr. Rob Schechter oversee the social emotional task force. So really the essential question that we look at is, how will we support the social emotional well-being of students, staff, and the community? And as a committee, we're looking at this if we were to stay remote, if we did have to be in some sort of a hybrid situation, and if we were back in person. So in terms of some of the considerations, there's a lot of different things that we've looked at. So one of the things is that we discussed that we thought it would be appropriate to look at all of the students within the school and look for some sort of a universal screener. So what this is some sort of an assessment so we can see really what the needs of the students are based upon where they're at. So depending on whether or not we'll be in school, we'll have some sort of a hybrid model. What are their needs? What is the level of anxiety? And how are we going to address those needs? So looking for an appropriate survey, I guess, would be the best way to describe it, and to get some information and collect data on some students we've already know and we've identified that might have a higher level of anxiety or worry, but there might be students that we haven't identified, and how can we do that? We've also looked at the 3 different levels in terms of elementary, middle, and high school to determine what an intervention plan would be. So once we determine what the needs of the students are, and we are trying to anticipate what the needs of the students might be, what their worries, fears, anxieties might be, how can we put specific interventions in place? So whether that's just having a lunch bunch group, or all the way to a more a higher level of intervention that might require some individual counseling from a school psychologist or a guidance counselor. So we're identifying all the different types of students or groups of students that we might have when we return, and how we can help to best serve their needs. One of the biggest things that we did discuss is that during this time, the students have not had the same opportunity that they would to socialize. And this really has had an impact on students K-12. So really, when we're looking at the schedules, again, within the 3 models, how are we including opportunities for socialization among peers? I think that this is really important, no matter what we're going to be doing in September, because there has been this lack of ability to interact consistently with peers. And so we need to make sure that we're providing these opportunities to meet the social emotional well-being of all the students. Education is very important, so I don't want to take away from that. But what's really important at the forefront is that they are feeling good, safe, and secure, and so that they can learn. Another thing that we discussed is who would be or who could be a support person for each child. So identifying whether that's a teacher, whether that's a guidance counselor, a school psychologist. There's a variety of different staff members, teaching assistants, aides, so that as we return back to school, how are we having a check-in to make sure that students are okay? So that not only are we identifying their needs, but there is some sort of staff member that's checking in with them to say, hey, how's it going? How are things? What do you need? The other thing we're looking at is what are the areas that we already currently have, and how can we help to support within what we already have in terms of social emotional learning. So there's many opportunities where this occurs within our curriculum now, and how can we build upon that to continue to support this for each child. In terms of the faculty and staff, it's also really important that we're taking care of the needs of the faculty as well. I think that there's many fears and anxiety that they also are going to have. And I think that we have to be able to say, this is how we're going to address those. How are we going to have, whether it's monthly support groups or things that they could talk about and address their needs. We want them to feel safe, and we really have to be able to reestablish kind of that sense of community within a school building. So that's something we're looking at. We also want to provide support and resources, not only for our staff, but for the community as well. This has been a very difficult time for many people, and what are the resources that are out there within the community should anyone need to access that. We want to continue to provide professional development. Ms. Goffman spoke about that in regards to the instructional task force, but how can we provide ongoing professional development, and how do you work and foster positive social emotional well-being of students during this crisis sort of situation? So we're looking for various opportunities for our staff and our students, as well as our community. And I think that's everything in a nutshell.
So I'm going to just give a quick overview of what the communications subgroup is focusing on. So one of the things you'll see is that either tomorrow or Thursday, a short communication with a link to this clipped presentation will be sent out to the community. That was a decision of the communications group on the task force, which is a Board of Education trustee. We have an elementary parent, we have a secondary parent, we have elementary teacher, secondary teacher, and then we've got reps from each of the other subgroups, operational, instructional, and social emotional. We've got administrators, Tracy Barnett, who is on every single subgroup of the task force, and communications. So this group will be charged with communicating with parents and the wider community, including the faculty and staff, about the details as we flesh out our plans and have more specific information to be sending out to families. So looking at ways to use video, audio, and traditional email communications to families and the community so that everyone understands all of the steps in a safe reopening to the school year. And the group will also serve as a conduit for feedback from the community regarding concerns, questions, and opinions about the reopening. So all of these groups will not be just working to get us to the submission of a reopening plan. These groups will be working throughout the school year next year, because we do anticipate that we have to be prepared to pivot from any one of different models based on the situation that we're facing throughout the course of the school year. So each of these groups will continue that work. So our next steps, we'll be sending this presentation out to the community. We will continue building out our models and getting more and more granular. We will review the guidance as it's released. The most important guidance we're looking for is from the Department of Health from New York State, the State Education Department, and the CDC. We will align our plans with the guidance that we receive. We continue to make modifications to facilities and procedures as necessary in order to successfully implement our plan and reopen safely. We continue, and this is a challenge, to procure supplies and materials as they are available. We have shared with you previously that we've been purchasing PPE and cleaning supplies and sanitizer and all of the ingredients for things like sanitizer since the closing in March, since before actually. But you know, we just got communications this week. Things that were supposed to be delivered this week are back ordered till August. So we continue to procure and find new vendors and suppliers for different things that we need. And that is a continuous next step in procuring those supplies. We'll be preparing communications for families, faculty, and staff. And we will await the final decision on school opening from Governor Cuomo. I have had some community members reach out to me to urge me to reopen the schools, and I do explain to them always that the final decision, and if you've seen some of the press conferences, the mayor of New York City announced that New York City would be reopening schools, and the next day, or maybe even a couple of hours later, there was a press release from the governor's office explaining that he does not have the authority to reopen the schools, that only the governor has that authority. So we are waiting and watching. I have no insight as to when that decision will be made, but our plans will be set and we will be ready to implement the appropriate plan as we approach the school year. And as soon as we have more details and have some guidance from the state, we will begin to further communicate more extensive information with the community. So one of the things, knowing that in this virtual meeting platform, that we're not able to have the feedback at the meeting from community members, what we'd like is that all questions be submitted to feedback@riseschools.org. What we will do is similar to what we do when the board has open topics forum. We will compile all of the questions and responses and post them all on the district website so that everyone in the community has access to the questions that were submitted to us based on tonight's presentation and the responses to all of those questions. And we'll send that out. We'll send the responses out to the community with a link to the